I just created the ultimate torture test for GPS watches. Yeah, that was pretty bad.
Welcome. I am the running otaku.
Well, hello there everybody, Running Otaku here. Thank you very much for tuning in. It's a very special week this week. It is Boston Registration Week. I qualified for my first ever Boston Marathon. Are you going next April? Well, I qualified by about 15 minutes or so, which means that my registration date is Wednesday, 7 a.m. here Pacific time in Portland. So Wednesday, 7 o'clock, I've got a date with my computer, and everything should go fine. From what I understand, anyone who's got a qualifying time of probably about 4.5 minutes or so under the standard should have no problem at all. So we'll see. So finally, I have laid out and accurately measured the Otaku Circuit. So the first question is, why did I create the Otaku Circuit? Well, let me tell you. So there are a number of people out there that have been doing a lot of great tests on GPS devices, watches, etc. I'm sure everyone knows DC Rainmaker. I've been following him since I got my first 305. That was probably 10, 12 years ago. It's been a long time. Anyways, I think he's absolutely wonderful. I always read his blog on a weekly basis. But when it comes to actually testing GPS, he takes the everyman approach, which just doesn't quite sit right with me. He likes to take watches in real-world conditions, which I think is great. But then he really looks just at the GPS tracks to see how well the watch performed. And to a certain extent, I agree with that methodology, but not completely, because the GPS tracks may not be a completely accurate representation of where the watch actually recorded its location, depending on the angle at which the map is shown and how closely the map is actually overlaid onto GPS coordinates. And then on the other extreme, we've got Fell Runner. I think that's how you pronounce it. I like him very much as well. From what I understand, he is primarily an ultra and trail runner. And he's taken a very systematic approach of laying out a course of several miles and marking off every half mile or so, and then testing a whole slew of watches and foot pods. And I think that's great. I lean a little bit more to his approach, although there are a few things that I would have liked to have seen done. I'm not an ultra runner. I run trails occasionally, but I'm not a trail runner. I'm more of a mainstream runner. And so I'm curious how watches perform when running on the roads, when running in urban and suburban environments. Also, how accurate distance and pace are, because I do a lot of either tempo runs or track runs, although for the track runs I just use the timer and see where I am on the track. But for the tempo runs, I really do like to make sure that I'm within a certain range to maximize my workout. And so I haven't found anyone who does exactly what I wanted, so that's why I decided to do it myself. And I did with the Otaku Circuit. So as I mentioned, it's just over a 10K. And it's really got 8 segments. There are 4 of which that are a real challenge for GPS devices. The first segment that's a challenge is known as Electric Avenue. As you see here, it measured 304 meters, which came out to 0.19 miles. And the reason I chose this segment is twofold. First, almost the entirety of the segment is under an overpass. It doesn't block out the sky completely, but it does block out, let's say, 50-60% overhead. And so I want to see how the watches perform if they lose satellite lock with a few satellites. Second, there's this big electrical thing. I think it has to do with electric streetcars that are driving around Portland. I'm not sure. I don't have any idea if it creates any kind of electromagnetic interference or something else that may cause cancer. I have no idea. But I want to see if that could throw off the watches. So that was the first segment. The second segment, since I'm here in Portland and the team is known as the Trailblazers basketball team, is the second segment is called Trailblazer. And this is a single track forested trail. It's 1,170 meters. which comes out to 0.73 miles. And this is a real good test of watch accuracy in the trails, in canyons, pretty thick canopy. As you'll see in the video here, it was bright, sunshiny day when I took the video, but almost all the video is in the shade. The canopy was that thick. So I think that's a great test for many of you that run on trails and are curious how well watches perform there. The third segment is called Black Diamond. I called it that because in my old days I used to be a skier. And while this isn't as steep as an advanced run, it's pretty steep. It's only 328 meters, which is 0.20 miles, but it's an average gradient of at least 20%, probably even more. It was kind of a bear just to walk down it without slipping. But I chose this because obviously with the GPS devices, they're measuring with the satellites triangulation, latitude and longitude. But there's the third dimension, right? Depth or elevation. And since this has such a steep drop, I was curious to see if such a steep gradient would throw off the GPS measurements. So that's the third section. And then finally, the last real challenge is called Downtown Blocks. This was 1,368 meters or 0.85 miles. And this is run right through the heart of downtown Portland. Now, we're not New York. We don't have tons of skyscrapers, but we do have a lot of 5 to 10 to up to 30, 40 story buildings. So what I did was I chose part of the grid and ran zigzag, like kind of a staircase pattern, if you will, on the sidewalks alongside the walls to see how the GPS watches would do running in that kind of downtown environment. Because I think many of you may experience that either if you're living in an urban environment or if you're running on your business travel, you're probably staying in a downtown hotel, and the first mile until you get out of the hotel is probably through a downtown type environment. So I think it makes a lot of sense. So anyways, that is the 4 tough sections of the course. The rest of the course are more gentle real world conditions. It goes through a suburban neighborhood. It crosses over the Willamette River twice, 2 different bridges, and runs alongside the waterfront. So a much easier task, if you will, for the GPS watches. But all told, if you combine the whole route, I think it's a really great real-world test to see how well these watches can perform. So I gave you the measurements for all the segments, and your next question probably is, well, how accurate are those measurements? And I think I can confidently say pretty accurate. Not perfect. I follow the U.S. Track and Field Association guidelines for course measurements. I'll link to that in the show notes, the methodology. But basically, I carefully calibrated a little doohickey gear that attaches to the front wheel of my bicycle. And I calibrated that. I measured the course, all 10K of it, 3 separate times. And all 3 of them were within, I think it was 26 meters, which is an error differential of like 0.26%. So to be USATF certified, I think you have to be 0.08%. So I'm 3 times over that limit, but I mean, come on, it's 25 meter difference, 26 meter difference over a 10K course. A couple tenths of a percent error. I think that's more than fine for you. For those that aren't, sorry, it's the best I can do. And I know that a lot of you will have a lot of questions about my methodology, not for measurement, but for actual testing. And these are really valid concerns. I mean, the fact of the matter is you can't do a perfect real world test. You just can't control for every factor, right? For example, the satellites are not geosynchronous. They move in the sky. So perhaps I did a trial when the satellites just happened to be out of line of sight, or only 1 or 2 of them were instead of 4 or 5. So that's quite possible. Another limitation is I'm only testing, at least on this Otaku Circuit, 2 times. Now for the Forest Trail Mount Tabor course and for the other course I did, which was, what was it? The Springwater Corridor. I did 10 tests for each device because there I wanted really accurate measurements of the watch's accuracy, and also its variance, or in statistical terms, its precision. You know, how closely did all of the samples clump up together. For this Otaku loop, I'm not doing that. I'm only taking 2 samples, and I'm running just one watch at a time, doing a loop, stopping, and then starting again, and doing a second loop. And then I'll plot those so you can see the GPS tracks. But more importantly, I want to see the distances, especially in those 4 killer segments, to see how they're doing. Now, I'm also publishing an article on runningotaku.com, and I'll get a lot more into the kind of shortcomings of my methodology. I know for a lot of you, you may not be completely satisfied with how I chose to run the test, but I think at least it's a good third alternative to what you may have already read on Fell Runner or on DC Rainmaker. So I hope it helps. Anyways, that's about it for today. Later in the week, I will publish the results of my first few tests with the Otaku Circuit and a few of the GPS watches I have. So stay tuned for those. If you like what you've seen here or any of my other videos, please subscribe. I've got, I think, 5 subscribers, and I think 4 of them are me, my aliases. But I have had over 400 views on a couple of my videos, which are fantastic. And that's not me. I'm not refreshing that much. So thank you for watching my videos. If you like this one, although I know it was a little bit dry, not too much excitement here, but go ahead, hit the like button anyways. And I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye.